Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy. Taking you back again to 1997 to the Hajj season in Nepal. Today we are heading towards the Trisuli. After a hearty breakfast, our bus driver came and collected us at 8 a.m. We had to drive through Pohkara and then a couple of hours down to the river. The city was completely different from what we had seen walking through during the strike. The market was packed with people, and the shops, although very grubby looking, were filled with people and excitement. Or at least that's how it looked through the dirty windows of our little minibus as we drove through town, pointlessly looking for a newspaper in English. After squandering half an hour on this windmill tilt, we decided we'd had enough of civilization and headed off for the dirty part of our vacation. Remember, we're looking for a newspaper because no internet back in the day. We reached the drop-off spot for our trip soon after 10:30. We walked down a long hill to reach the churning Trisuli River. The river runs fiercely in spots, up to a grade 5 rapids. Niagara Falls is a grade 6. But since we had the children along, and since the guy misinterpreted our feeling towards our children, we would be doing the baby part of the river. Some class 3 rapids and some floating. Still, it was Alex and Frankie's first river rafting, and they were quite excited by it. For a third world country that has deadly drinking water, bacteria-laden food, lice-ridden beds, crumbling infrastructure, and a general state of disrepair, they have great rafting supplies. The rafts were first class, the helmets, paddles. We could have been rafting the Colorado for the supplies we had. You could see them behind us. Our guide gave us the briefest and safety instructions. We hopped in the boat and began our journey. And given the absolute calmness of the water, the guide did make it exciting for the kids. Every ripple in the water and every log we went over, the guide had a name for. The three faces of death, the journey into hell, the log of no remorse. We got bumped around a bit, but no one came remotely close to getting thrown out of the boat. I remember doing the New River in Tennessee and being thrown out of the boat about 5 times. But for the kids, it was all anticipation and excitement. They would listen for the roar, grumble really, of rushing water ahead. Then they would spot a series of ripples in the water and call out to the guide, "What was the name of this?" When they heard it was the serpents of Satan, they would all squeal and brace themselves in the boat. In late morning, it began to rain on us. With the drizzle and the splashing from the rapids, by lunchtime, we were all quite soaked. For lunch, we pulled onto a sandbar and the guide fixed us some sandwiches. For about an hour, we dried out and skipped stones, then back into the boat. The last bit was only that, a bit. Maybe an hour more of rafting before we found our night's camping spot. But that was enough. There was a certain sameness to the river valley we floated along. It was a bit of a shallow V-shaped gorge with moderate-sized walls, say 1,000 feet, on the left and right of us. The walls were slanted enough, though, and covered in late shrubs and trees that one could safely climb to the top in maybe an hour. And in fact, on top of one of the walls of the gorge was the road that we would ultimately take back to Kathmandu. You could periodically hear a car going by, but not enough that it was a nuisance. On the shoreline, periodically we would see a herd, flock, bunch of monkeys. But the problem with rafting is that you pretty much go by everything in a hurry. And outside of one or two monkey herds, we didn't see many other wild creatures. It was a relief, though, that we also didn't see many people. The random fisherman waist deep in the water with a big net or child playing on the shore. But for a country where we rarely went an hour without seeing people, the river was strangely devoid of them. Then again, maybe not so strange when one remembers that they use their river as ashtrays for the dead. So the sameness settled in and quickly, and with the kids beginning to realize that the rapids were no more life-threatening than a kiddie ride at the fair, it was nice that we stopped when we did. That doesn't really capture my feelings, though. We stopped maybe 3 o'clock, and we stopped on this marvelous large sand dune. We set up camp quickly and had just about the nicest afternoon of our trip. We went swimming in the icy waters of the Trisuli, which felt nice after the hot, hot day. We went rock hunting, we played in the sand, we read, we talked. Just as beautiful a spot as you could imagine. The boys began a major project of carving the walls of the ancient city of Petra into the sand. Really quite an elaborate sculpture. When we went to have dinner, one of the boys stood guard over the work against the three little local boys that had decided to see what all the excitement was about. As night fell, the wind began to pick up. Everyone went to bed early except me. The guide had fashioned two shielded from being blown out by the wind candle holders that he stuffed in the sand. Then I carved out a sand chair in the dune and sat and read under the billion stars and listening to the river bubble past. It's moments like that why we conspire to spend all this money and risk dragging yourselves out of the comfort of home to some strange land. It wasn't long, though, before the wind began to howl, and soon my candles were out, and my shorts and light jacket served as no protection from it. I scurried to the warmth of the tent and went quickly down to sleep. I woke about 10 times during the night to go pee, the downside of sleeping next to running water. The next morning, we climbed into the boat for our half-day finish of the Trisuli. It would be a waste to spend much time explaining it because, well, nothing happened. Floating down a river sounds very glamorous and Tom Sawyer-ish, but it's fun for a while, and then it's just a very, 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 very slow bus trip. The last few hours of the Trisuli, we left the gorge area and entered into the long, wide open floodplain. We began passing a lot of villages with families out washing their clothes, and God knows what else, in the water. By noonish, it was getting quite hot. At one point, we all decided to jump into the muddy, I hope it was mud, water to cool down. Well, I guess not all of us. Alex had some kind of cut and said he didn't want to get into the water. I tried to coax him in, but was secretly relieved. Our consulate friends who had lived here delighted in telling the tale of the American woman who had vacationed here. She went rafting and scraped her leg at a rock. This was some kind of 4-day adventure raft trip, so she didn't seek medical attention, and by the end of the trip, she was dead from the wound. So it took all my mental powers of rationality to overcome my fear. But that was for me. If the boy wanted to just stay in the boat, well, I wasn't going to beg him to come swimming in the sewer with Frankie and me. But it was also hot and the water was cool, so maybe it was worth it. Our journey ended at the hydroelectric dam on the river. With dams come electricity, and with electricity comes industry, and with industry comes people, and with industry and people comes pollution. So our last half-hour float was through some really foul-looking and smelling water. We pulled up to the wretched-looking shore and were greeted by a number of roach-like children asking for 1 rupiah. We were all tired and grossed out by everything around us. It was hot, and after about 5 hours floating that day in the sun, we were burned and dehydrated. We left the stinking fetid shore to walk up a hill into a stinking fetid city where a van was waiting for us to take us to the jungle. The van, of course, had a flat tire, the changing of which afforded Joe and I the opportunity to go into the stinking fetid city to find a place to buy some cokes. At first, when the woman heard that we wanted 10 to take with us, she wasn't going to sell them. Apparently, the bottles are of huge value, and the coke was only to be drunk in her presence. Finally, we convinced her, bribed, that we would bring the bottles back in 5 minutes. At that point, the van, no air conditioning, tire was fixed. We all chugged our cokes. We were on a tight schedule, returned the bottles, and merrily burped our way out of town. I think we all slept during the 2-hour drive down to Chittawan National Park. And I will leave you there today. Tomorrow we will talk about Chittawan. Let me real quickly show you the map of where we were at. Okay. So remember, we started in Kathmandu. Let's take you all the way back so you can see here are the Himalayan mountains. Here is India. China over here, Chengdu, not so far away. We were staying at Kathmandu We flew to Pohkara. Pohkara was where we went hiking into the foothills of the Annapurnas. And from there, we took about a 2-hour drive down to the Trisuli River. And you can see the river right here. It went along this long, beautiful gorge. Back and forth it went. And we ended up out here by the hydroelectric dam. And from the hydroelectric dam, we got into our van and we headed down to Chittawan National Park, land of the tigers and rhinos and elephants. So if you can see the crazy mountains up here and down here, we're at sea level. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for coming. Talk to you again soon.